There's one question that everybody in the financial world has been dying to know. Who's buying all the gold? Is it the Treasury? Is it the Fed?
There's something going on with gold, and nobody really knows what it is. Somebody here in the United States is buying a crap load of gold. We think, I hope, it's the Treasury or the central bank, the Fed. But somebody is taking huge physical deliveries, and it's causing shortages in London, where they buy and sell gold. There are shortages now of gold because somebody is buying it and shipping it here. Somebody with very deep pockets.
We don't have to guess at too many theories anymore. Elon and Team Doge might be calling gold home for an audit. The American people need to verify that the gold that they say is in Fort Knox is actually there. What a novel idea. And why is this important? Well, because everything we've been told about financial markets and money for the last 50 years has probably been a lie. Central banks like Australia have already acknowledged the presence of fake gold bars. And a much bigger fraud that doesn't involve gold or Fort Knox is in the federal government itself. I mean, how does $4.7 trillion go untracked and is untraceable? Or what about the fact that the United States government hasn't been able to be audited in the last 26 years? Our world wants an open, transparent, and truthful system to keep our checks and our balances aligned. And Bitcoin so happens to do that every 10 minutes. Today, we're going to talk about the implications of the lies around the gold system being exposed. We're going to talk about why crypto is not the solution and why Bitcoin is the solution to our transparency problem globally. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. Let's go. There's not always a culturally appropriate moment to bring in Ben, Ron, and Leslie from Parks and Rec, but I think this moment deserves it.
I really like your shirt.
So I'd like to talk about where you think there's waste within your department.
Where do I start?
Ben is Elon, and Ron is anyone with a brain or anyone who wants to admit that these payments from the federal government aren't actually true. And Leslie, she's the deep state. Fun fact. Did you know that Clinton and Al Gore were the original Doge team? They cut the federal workforce by 377,000 people using early retirements and buyouts. That was the biggest cut since World War II. And I know, because my parents were federal government employees, and they were bought out, which led us to buy our first house. But since then, we've gone into a shadow government. A government that hasn't been able to be audited in the last 26 years. I mean, seriously, it's alleged that there are thousands and millions of people receiving Social Security benefits that are over 100 years old. And somehow there were $4.7 trillion worth of payments that weren't tracked and were left optional in the government database systems. Alex Karp, Palantir CEO, correctly identifies that the largest problems facing America are the lack of transparency, the lack of faith in institutions, and the growth of AI. How in the world can the government not know where $4.7 trillion worth of money has gone to?
What is the biggest problem in this society? Biggest problem in this society from my perspective is legitimacy of our institutions. Why aren't they legitimate? They're not legitimate because, okay, do any of you really believe that 99% of your taxpayer dollars are being spent? But last and not least, and probably arguably most importantly, there's two revolutions happening. One is transparency and one is AI. Okay, so why is it that we do not know where every penny of our money goes? Like, how do you explain that to people? And by the way, slightly more technically, what large language models do is you can go into the contracts and see exactly what happened. So in the past, we couldn't do this. Now we can. The right response is, we want this to happen. We want to happen. We want to be involved in the dialogue. The real response is, it feels like the people criticizing Elon don't want it to happen. And this is going to destroy those people.
Some believe this is what caused Michelle King, the head of the Social Security Administration, to resign. People have been suspicious about the activities of the government for a long time, and they've always wanted to know. And the culmination of this is the audit of the vaulted, no pun intended, Fort Knox gold reserves. If you put your tinfoil hat on, people have been trying to uncover if there actually has ever been gold in Fort Knox since 1971. People like Leslie Boyer and Ed Durrell.
Naturally, gold prices immediately began to soar. 9 years later, gold sold for $880 per ounce, 25 times what the gold in Fort Knox was sold for.
One would think that eventually someone in the government
would get wind of what was happening and blow the whistle. The largest fortune in the history of the world stolen. Shades of the old James Bond film, Goldfinger. Well, as a matter of fact, Ian Fleming, the author of the James Bond series, was head of the British counterintelligence service, MI5.
Some believe in the intelligence community that he wrote much of his fiction as a warning, as many authors of fiction do.
If the removal of all the good delivery gold from Fort Knox can be viewed as a deliberate raid on the U.S. Treasury, then such an operation might well have been years in the making, namely 40 years. Certainly enough time for Fleming to get wind of it and try to prevent it. So just how did the story of the Fort Knox gold robbery get out?
It all started with an article in a New York periodical in 1974. The article charged that the Rockefeller family was manipulating the Federal Reserve to sell off Fort Knox gold at bargain basement prices to anonymous European speculators. 3 days later, the anonymous source of the story, Louise Auchincloss Boyer, mysteriously fell to her death from the window of her 10th floor apartment in New York. How would Mrs. Boyer have known of the Rockefeller connection to the Fort Knox gold heist? She was the longtime secretary of Nelson Rockefeller.
For the next 14 years, this man, Ed Durrell, a wealthy Ohio industrialist, devoted himself to a quest for the truth concerning the Fort Knox gold. He wrote thousands of letters to over 1,000 government and banking officials, trying to find out how much gold was really left and where the rest of it had gone. Edith Roosevelt, the granddaughter of President Teddy Roosevelt, questioned the actions of the government in a March 1975 edition of the New Hampshire Sunday News.
Allegations of missing gold from our Fort Knox vaults are being widely discussed in European financial circles. But what is puzzling is that the administration is not hastening to demonstrate conclusively that there is no cause for concern over our gold treasure, if indeed it is in a position to do so. Unfortunately, Ed Durrell never did accomplish his primary goal, a full audit of the gold reserves in Fort Knox. It's incredible that the world's greatest treasure has had little accounting or auditing. This gold belonged to the American people, not the Federal Reserve and their foreign owners. One thing is certain, the government could blow all of this speculation away in a few days with a well-publicized audit under the searing lights of media cameras. It has chosen not to do so. One must conclude that they are afraid of the truth such an audit would reveal. What is the government so afraid of? Here's the answer. When President Ronald Reagan took office in 1981, his conservative friends urged him to study the feasibility of returning to a gold standard as the only way to curb government spending. It sounded like a reasonable alternative, so President Reagan appointed a group of men called the Gold Commission to study the situation and report back to Congress. What Reagan's Gold Commission reported back to Congress in 1982 was the following shocking revelation concerning gold. The U.S. Treasury owned no gold at all. All the gold that was left in Fort Knox was now owned by the Federal Reserve, a group of private bankers, as collateral against the national debt. The truth of the matter is that never before has so much money been stolen from the hands of the general public and put into the hands of a small group of private investors, the money changers.
I'll let you do with that clip as you will. But this highlights the fundamental problems with gold and why Bitcoin is superior. I mean, let's go back to the famed debate between Jack Mallers and Peter Schiff in September of last year on why Bitcoin is clearly superior to gold and why gold has only one choice, but to continue to be more and more centralized.
The real problem with gold is that, unfortunately, it has to centralize. The problem is that gold can't achieve transaction finality without the help of a government or a central party, meaning that when gold was operating in a local economy and you can exchange the physical coins with your direct counterpart for your butcher, your local tailor, your grocer, whoever you were exchanging with, gold was great. when the world needed to scale an economy and the velocity of money larger than your local economy, gold failed us. Gold failed us because gold is just a bare physical metal. It does not carry a monetary network. What's the gold network? The gold network are human beings. And when you're trying to transact in an economy of billions of people globally, you are reliant on central parties, banks, governments. And it was for that reason that gold failed. And it failed in a way that you can't operate a truly free market when the concentrated supply is with those that you have to trust. And so that's fundamentally what Bitcoin solved, is that you are able to create a scarce bearer instrument and a network that can achieve finality in transactional settlement without the reliance on any government or central party. So that, I think, is extremely, that's really the core issue of why gold's been demonetized since. I think on the points of Bitcoin like needing more history and it's young, I mean, I think that sounds like a personal problem for you, Peter. Like that, I think you need more evidence. And that's you being slow to recognize reality, right? Like if you were to need the internet to prove that email is better than traditional mail, you would just be late to adopting better technology. That doesn't sound like, that's not a point or a criticism against the properties that Bitcoin has. That's your own personal bias of how much proof that you need to adopt something that might be superior. So that's on you. And the last thing I will say on Bitcoin's volatility, for the listeners, I really think it's an important fundamental point. Risk is not the same thing as volatility.
The reality of the gold market is this: no one actually owns gold, which is why people like JPMorgan have been shorting gold and manipulating its price for years. And it's ironic, not in a Die Hard 3 kind of way, but just physically and geographically, that the gold vaults for JPMorgan and the Federal Reserve just happen to potentially be connected through tunnels. But beyond that, let's go behind the manipulation of the gold markets and why people continue to short gold that they don't have.
I can divulge a little bit of why this mechanics works without, boring people too much, but it's like when you can't borrow a stock to short it. I short a stock, right? And then I have to borrow it to short it. Well, you have to, at some point, cover the short. And what happens when you cover the short is you cover it because either it becomes too hard to borrow, right? Or because you've made money, or because it's gone up. Now, we take that concept and we bring it to gold, which is where it started. And I am a speculator who has no interest, who does not have the gold for delivery. I don't have it. Some do, some don't. And I short the contract, and the market goes up. And it comes to expiration, let's say on COMEX, and the person says, you know what? The long, who's usually the weaker hand in the relationship, the small hand, says, I think I want the gold. I want the gold now. And I say, as a short, I don't have it. I have to borrow it, like borrowing a short for a share. And that's where the lease rate starts to go up. Well, where's the gold? Oh, it's over in London. Let me borrow it. In gold in London to lease, it's all over the place. You can get it anywhere you want. It's 10 basis points. And then it's 50 basis points.
Let me follow this. So you're saying, I've sold you some gold I don't have. And suddenly next Tuesday, you're like, Chris, where's my bar? And I'm like, I'll be right back. And I have to go find a bar.
Right.
And somebody's willing to lease me that bar.
Absolutely.
And I can pay that. And the idea is that I pay a lease rate, and then some point in the future I give them a real bar back. But if it turns out we have a real shortage of bars out there and everybody's trying to do the same thing, you get a chart that looks like this. Did I get that right?
Yes, you got it right.
Which leads me to our first sponsor, which is Ledin. Because you can't manipulate Ledin's contract or their loans with you, because you actually have to post Bitcoin collateral in order to receive a loan. There is no lease market. And that's why Ledin has been the leader in Bitcoin-backed loans since 2018 and have surpassed $7 billion worth of loans to tens of thousands of customers and have never lost a single cent or sat of customer funds. It's simple. You post collateral, 2 times the amount, and you get the loan. The loan process takes just 2 minutes to complete, and you can have your account funded in less than 24 hours. Go to ledin.io/borrowing in order to get started with your account process today. That's ledin.io/borrowing. And other huge news happening today. 98% of the creditors of the FTX liquidation are being paid out for the Bitcoin that they're owed. The only problem is the Bitcoin payout value is at about $20,000 per coin, which leads to our next sponsor and why it's so important. If you can't verify it, You don't own it. Not your keys, not your coin. And our partner, the Bitcoin Way, will help you to take full custody and have full control of your Bitcoin, and you can verify that it's actually there so that you can receive Bitcoin at, say, $95,000 worth of coin versus $20,000 like the FTX creditors. The Bitcoin Way will hook you up with a member of their team so that you can remove your Bitcoin from third-party custodian exchanges like FTX and take full custody of your Bitcoin by removing the private keys from those exchanges. It's simple. You'll be confident that you actually own the Bitcoin that an exchange says you do after scheduling a free 30-minute consultation with their team. Go to thebitcoinway.com/simplybitcoin to schedule a free 30-minute consultation with their team. Okay, so opposite of gold's fake and opaque market, we see that 62% of Bitcoin has not moved within the past year. And you know why? Because we can actually audit it every 10 minutes. I mean, people can verify the entire history of Bitcoin with about $50 worth of computer parts and a node in their basement. I'm not mad at gold bugs. Gold was a great store of value for the last 5,000 years. But here's the problem. When you adjust for CPI inflation, gold is just now reaching an all-time high after 45 years. I mean, even with Bitcoin chopping sideways at 95K, it's still up 84% in the past year and over 30% since Michael Saylor said this on this clip, that Bitcoin is going to eat the gold market.
Bitcoin is certainly at least digital gold. It's going to eat gold. It's got all of the great attributes of gold, and it's got none of the defects of gold. If you could teleport gold from New York to Tokyo in a few minutes, people would like it. It's going to divert capital from risk assets and risk ETFs like SPY, and you can see that these ETFs are doing that. It's going to be incorporated into a lot of funds like the BlackRock Global Opportunities Fund or the Strategic Income Opportunities Fund. And so as it's an asset class. As it goes into other funds, it's going to become structural. The halving is going to cut the organic supply of natural sellers in half around April 20th. That means there's only about $32 million a day of natural sellers. And the price of Bitcoin is going to have to adjust up in order to meet that investor demand. So I think that's what's going to happen next to the asset.
Bitcoin is the dominant digital network, and you can boo Bitcoin at your own peril and find out just like Canada did. Bitcoin will continue to be the dominant digital network over the next century. And institutions are waking up to that fact. That's why they bought 54 times the amount of Bitcoin now than they did at this same time last year. Institutions are piling into companies like MicroStrategy who are buying this generational asset. Here's a list of institutions that have added 1 million shares of MicroStrategy in the past quarter. UBS, Cantor Fitzgerald, Clear Street, Bank of Montreal, Norges Bank, the National Bank of Canada. Oh, and BlackRock. There were 196 13F filings of MicroStrategy in Q3 of 2020. And in Q4 of 2024, there were over 1,000. People are learning that there is real innovation and that the next form of money won't look like the old money of the past. Whether it's gold, which for the last 5,000 years have been melted down, diluted, confiscated, stolen, and manipulated, or it's the latest crypto project that people believe is actually money. People are learning the difference between the real innovation of Bitcoin, the newest form of money, and how it will be different than the money of the last 5,000 years, which has been gold, which has been melted down, diluted, confiscated, stolen, and manipulated. And they're also learning that Bitcoin is not crypto. It's nothing like Libra coin, Trump coin, or Melania coin, which has insiders rug pulling people and admitting it on interviews for us all to see.
Now, this is a bit of a sensitive topic, but I have to ask because, this is part of what my story is about. A lot of people have linked you to the Melania launch, and that is a big question on everyone's mind, mine especially, which is, were you part of the Melania launch, and was that sniped as well?
I mean, look, I think that, I told you beforehand before this started, I'm happy to share the truth, but you're asking a question that's, it's just, I'll answer, but it's just factually going to put me into a lot of danger, which is fine. I'll answer. I was part of it. I think the team did want to snipe it because of how big the snipe was on Trump's. And we weren't we definitely weren't the big sniper.
we were not that was what we were trying to avoid. And we didn't make any, there was no money made from the Melania team on any, we didn't take any liquidity out. Zero.
Okay.
Javier Milei, the libertarian hero, is an example of why they say never meet your heroes, because he won't even admit that he's been a part of the pump and dump Libra scam. He had this to say: if you went to a casino and lost money, what's the complaint? I didn't promote it. I just spread it. I used my personal account. Well, you're continuing to spread lies and promote things that are not true. With Bitcoin, you don't have to trust me, the government, or your favorite politician. You can trust the node and you can trust the code and verify it for yourself. There is no single person or party that controls or owns Bitcoin. And that's why we can trust it to store our value and as the next form of money for the next 100 years. Hopefully, you're beginning to see why companies like Bitwise are posting the addresses of where their customers' ETFs are stored for everyone to see. You can also see where all of El Salvador's Bitcoin is being stored by just going to their page on the mempool. Bitcoin is restoring trust between government and the people and restoring our trust in money. Let me leave you with one soundbite of wisdom for the road.
I think that you will spend 40,000 hours of your life, maybe 60,000 hours of your life trying to make money. It is worthwhile to spend 100 hours of your life figuring out how to keep it.
And if you believe that you should spend 100 hours on trying to keep your money, one of the best ways that you can invest in keeping your money is by coming down to the BitBlockBoom conference in Dallas, Texas from April 3rd through April 6th. Join me and some of your other favorite speakers like Parker Lewis, Guy Swan, Marty Bent, and Bob Burnett. Get access to exclusive workshops like how to buy my first Bitcoin, how to mine Bitcoin at home, and meet some of your favorite Bitcoiners in real life at parties and events like our Saturday casino night. You won't want to miss it. Go to BitBlockBoom.com and get $100 off your all-inclusive ticket by using the promo code BBB25. That's BitBlockBoom.com and use the promo code BBB25. I can't wait to meet some of you guys down there in a little over a month. This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply. I hope that if you're getting value from this videos that you would like, you would share, you would subscribe to the channel. And as always, happy stacking.